Stranger Things Season 5 was a complete mess, and by the time it ended, the Duffer Brothers had left behind plot holes so ridiculous they're actually hilarious. So, in this video I'll be breaking down every single plot hole and unanswered questions across the entire Stranger Things Season 5. Vecna is supposed to be this god-level threat who can bend reality, open gates whenever he wants, and basically control the Upside Down. But the plot hole here is that the moment the kids get involved, he suddenly struggles with basic things like tracking them down or finishing them off. Sometimes he's unstoppable, and other times he can't even stop a group of teenagers with flashlights. His power level keeps changing depending on what the story needs, which makes him feel less like an all-powerful villain and more like a character who only wins when the plot allows it. Season 5 spends a lot of time trying to figure out whether Vecna was the real mastermind or just another pawn in a bigger plan. The show never actually gives us a clear answer. By the finale, it's still unclear if Vecna created the Mind Flayer's plan or if the Mind Flayer was always the one in control. The hierarchy between them stays confusing right up to the end, leaving one of the biggest questions in the series weirdly unresolved. We see Hawkins literally starts tearing itself apart with massive cracks, portals opening everywhere, and the Upside Down bleeding into the real world. But somehow, the military and even normal civilians are barely involved. There is no real evacuation plan and nothing that feels proportional to a disaster of this size. Everything stays weirdly contained to a small group of characters, which makes the situation feel way less realistic than it should be. During the final battle, a big question is where all the Demogorgons and other upside-down creatures actually were. The Duffer Brothers explained this by saying Vecna didn't expect the gang to invade his turf during the finale. This explanation makes no sense. These kids have been messing up his plans for 4 seasons straight and almost took him down in the last alone. The idea that Vecna didn't just see them coming feels lazy, especially when he can just spy on their minds. Joyce and Hopper both knew about Henry Creel and his past, but Season 5 never really addresses why they don't react more strongly to that information. Henry turns out to be Vecna, the main villain behind everything, yet Joyce and Hopper barely acknowledge any personal connection to him. Even though they study in the same school the same year, it feels like the show skips over an important emotional and logical reaction just to keep the plot moving. What was even the point of Dr. K in Season 5? She gets introduced like she's going to be important, tied to the government response, but then she barely does anything meaningful. Her character feels like setup with no payoff, she doesn't change the plan, and she doesn't impact the final outcome in any real way. By the end, you're left wondering why she was even at it at all, especially in a final season where every character should matter. The show never really explains what happened to the pregnant women affected by the Upside Down events, and that's a huge plot hole. The Duffer Brothers later said in interviews that they all died, but none of that is actually shown or addressed in the show itself. The problem here is that this information only exists outside the story, which makes the world feel incomplete and leaves viewers confused unless they go looking for answers off screen. Nancy and Hopper straight up kill multiple soldiers over the course of the series, and Nancy and Hopper never deals with the consequences at all. None of it comes back to haunt them, there are no investigations and no charges from the military. Instead, Hopper is somehow rewarded, offered the role of chief of the department, and even talks about moving to Montauk like nothing ever happened. Will is still connected to Vecna and the hive mind all the way into Season 5, but the problem is that when Vecna and the hive mind are killed, Will feels almost nothing. Earlier seasons established that he could sense pain whenever something happened in the Upside Down, but in the finale, there's no backlash from losing that connection. It feels inconsistent with how strongly the show previously portrayed Will's bond to Vecna and the hive mind. Mac's condition is one of the biggest inconsistencies in Season 5. She's left blind, with all 4 limbs broken, and is even described as brain dead at one point. But by the end of the season, she's basically fine with no lasting damage that matches what we were told earlier. The issue here isn't that she survives, it's that the recovery feels way too clean. There's no clear explanation and no consequences, which makes the earlier stakes around her injuries feel meaningless in hindsight. Henry gets shot as a child while he's in the cave, and that injury is treated like a serious life-changing moment. But the plot hole is that once he becomes Vecna, that gunshot wound is never mentioned or shown again. There's no scar and no explanation for how it healed, especially given how important his physical suffering was to his transformation. So apparently, Henry has this whole mysterious backstory, but the show never explains where that random scientist even came from or why this glowing rock suddenly matters. The audience is left completely in the dark, and if the writers expect people to get it by watching some live stage show, that's just ridiculous, especially when the play isn't even online for most fans to see. It makes his backstory feel unfinished and almost pointless. Lucas gets seriously injured in episode 4, and the show makes a big deal out of it like he can barely stand and it's meant to feel dangerous, but then in the very next episode, he's suddenly running full speed carrying Max, kicking demo dogs and acting completely fine with no recovery time, which makes the injury feel pointless in the first place. The Upside Down used to be shown as dry, lifeless copy of the real world, no rivers, no lakes, just creepy empty land. But then episode 5 drops a massive water tank into the mix, completely filled, and never explains where the water came from, how it got there, or why it suddenly exists in a place that was clearly dry before. The show completely ignores its own established rules about the Upside Down's environment, making the world feel inconsistent and kind of sloppy. When the mission ends, the gang just casually walks away without thinking about the fact that they still have to pass through the same military facility where they literally killed a bunch of soldiers just hours earlier. The plot hole here is that none of them seem to consider the consequences of being straight-up murderers. You'd expect at least a little tension, panic, or some plan for dealing with the fallout, but instead they're just kind of chill about it, like it's no big deal. It makes the whole sequence feel way too convenient and unrealistic. In season 2, Callie is shown using her powers to hide her friends from the cops, and she's super strict about them not saying a single word. The plot hole here is that in season 5, Max and the kids are basically doing a full-on podcast with Henry standing right beside them. The show never explains why that kind of telepathic caution completely disappears, making the rules of powers feel like a mess. Stranger Things ends with a flash forward 18 months after Eleven's death, showing Will, Mike, Dustin, Lucas, and Max getting ready for their high school graduation. It's a big emotional moment after everything they went through over the last 5 years, but the plot here is Max. She was in coma for 18 months, and we don't really know how long her recovery took. She also wasn't exactly a model student before all this, so it's kind of wild that she still manages to graduate with her class after missing a year and a half of school. Maybe the school cut her some slack because of everything that happened in Hawkins between 1986 and 1988, but the show doesn't really explain it. The epilogue of the Stranger Things finale shows what happens to most of the main characters after Vecna is defeated and the Upside Down is destroyed, but the problem here is Vicky Dunn, Robin's girlfriend. She's completely absent from the final moments. The last we see of her is when Dr. K and the military ambush her friends outside the Mother Gate, and while she was probably released after Eleven's death, the show never actually confirms it. Robin doesn't mention her in the epilogue, which makes it seem like they're no longer together, but that's never addressed on screen, considering their relationship was a recurring part of the series. It feels weird that the show doesn't give any closure, especially since Vicky apparently gave up the plan to Dr. K, which could have caused tension between them. In season 1, anytime someone entered the Upside Down, they were always shown wearing full suits and code, like it was some kind of serious hazard. In season 5, characters are just roaming around like it's a regular park with no protective gear at all. The show never explains why the rules suddenly changed, making the Upside Down feel way less dangerous and inconsistent with how it was established earlier. And so, these were all the plot holes in Stranger Things Season 5. Subscribe for more.